What happens when a wealthy woman's prejudice collides with undeniable talent? In the heart of Oakwood, 59-year-old James Carter's skillful hands have shaped more than just hair, they've built community. But when arrogant developer Victoria Winslow dismisses him as just a neighborhood barber, neither suspects how dramatically their worlds will intertwine. What could possibly make a woman who values only wealth and status question everything she believes? Dear viewer, watch or listen this full story to witness a confrontation that will leave you questioning, how often do we miss extraordinary talent because of our own blind spots? And, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. James Carter's hands moved with the precision of a surgeon and the grace of a dancer as he guided his scissors through his client's hair. At 59, his fingers still possessed the steadiness and intuition that had made Carter's classic cuts the cornerstone of the Oakwood neighborhood for over 3 decades. The barbershop hummed with the familiar melody of community, laughter punctuating serious discussions about politics, family troubles, and neighborhood changes. Framed photographs lined the walls, chronicling not just hairstyles but the passage of time itself, children who grew into adults, graduates, weddings, local heroes. "Mr. James, you've been cutting my hair since I was sitting on that booster seat," said Marcus, a young attorney who still returned to Oakwood despite having moved to the suburbs. "Nobody else understands my hairline like you do." James smiled, the fine wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "That's because your hairline and I have history. We've been negotiating terms for 20 years. The other barbers, all trained under James's watchful eye, chuckled. They knew that James's talent extended beyond technical skill. He saw the person beneath the hair, understood how to bring dignity to everyone who sat in his chair. As the day wound down, Darius, his youngest apprentice, approached with an envelope. "This came for you, Mr. Carter. Looks fancy." James wiped his hands on a towel before carefully opening the cream-colored envelope. His eyebrows rose slightly as he read. "The National Styling Exhibition," he murmured. "They're inviting me to compete." "That's the big one," Darius exclaimed. "All those celebrity stylists and luxury salon owners compete there." James set the invitation down. "I haven't competed in years. Not sure an old-school barber belongs in that world." Mrs. Gladys Washington, who had been coming for her short crop every 2 weeks since James opened, spoke up from under the dryer. "You're not just any barber, James Carter. You're an artist. Those fancy stylists could learn something from you." James studied the invitation again. The competition would be held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, ironically, just blocks from his modest shop. According to the letter, participants would compete under pseudonyms, with only their work speaking for them. Something stirred in him, not pride, but purpose. Lately, developers had been circling Oakwood like vultures. Perhaps this was a chance to showcase not just his own talent, but the cultural significance of places like his barbershop, which offered far more than haircuts. "Maybe it's time to remind the city what's been here all along," he said quietly, tucking the invitation into his pocket. Victoria Winslow regarded the skyline from her penthouse office with the satisfaction of someone who had helped reshape it. At 39, she was already a force in Chicago's real estate development world, known for transforming underperforming neighborhoods into luxury districts. "The Oakwood proposal needs your final approval," her assistant said, placing a folder on her immaculate desk. "The community board is still pushing back, but the numbers are promising." Victoria skimmed the projections. "They always resist at first. They'll thank us when their property values triple." She signed the document with a flourish. "Schedule the announcement for next month. I want to walk the neighborhood myself before we go public." After her assistant left, Victoria's gaze drifted to the photograph on her desk, her son Ethan in his prep school uniform. Being a single mother while building her empire hadn't been easy, but she'd managed by approaching parenthood with the same efficiency she brought to business. Her phone rang, Charlotte Hemmings, her friend and fellow board member at the Arts Council. Victoria, darling, please tell me you haven't forgotten about the National Styling Exhibition. We need your final confirmation as a judge. Victoria sighed. Of course I haven't forgotten. Though I still don't understand why I was selected. Because you have impeccable taste, and because your company is the main sponsor this year, Charlotte replied. The competition begins Friday. Anonymous entries, blind judging, all very dramatic. It'll be refreshing to judge something purely on merit for once. After hanging up, Victoria made a note in her calendar. The exhibition wasn't how she'd choose to spend her weekend, but networking opportunities would abound, and the Arts Council position added the right cultural polish to her business reputation. Ms. Winslow, her assistant interrupted. Your son's school called. Ethan needs professional photos tomorrow for the yearbook committee, and they specifically mentioned his hair needs styling. Victoria frowned at this unwelcome complication. Her usual stylist was booked, and Ethan's hair had grown unruly. She checked her schedule. She planned to visit Oakwood tomorrow anyway. Perhaps she could find some acceptable salon there, handle two matters at once. Fine, she said. Tell them it will be taken care of. She returned to the Oakwood proposal, already calculating how to transition those old storefronts into the upscale boutiques her vision demanded. Change was inevitable, she told herself. Progress couldn't be stopped for sentiment. The bell above the door at Carter's Classic Cuts jangled merrily as Victoria Winslow stepped inside, her Louboutin heels clicking against the worn linoleum. A silence gradually fell over the normally boisterous shop as heads turned toward the unexpected visitor. Victoria's eyes surveyed the space with barely concealed judgment, the vintage Barber chairs, the faded photographs, the decades-old sports memorabilia. This was exactly the kind of establishment her development would replace with something more current. James was finishing up with a longtime client when he noticed her standing impatiently by the reception counter. He nodded to Darius to greet her while he completed his work. Welcome to Carter's, Darius said warmly. Do you have an appointment today? Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. No, but I need a haircut for my son immediately. She gestured toward Ethan, who stood awkwardly behind her, eyes fixed on his phone. It's for school photographs tomorrow. Darius checked the appointment book. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're fully booked this afternoon. I could schedule. Perhaps you don't understand, Victoria interrupted, her voice sharpening. I have an important meeting in this neighborhood and no time to drive elsewhere. Surely someone here can accommodate us. I'm happy to pay extra. From his station, James watched the interaction. He saw the boy glance up briefly, embarrassment coloring his features at his mother's tone. James recognized the look, a child caught between worlds, bearing the weight of a parent's expectations. I can take him, James said, finishing with his client. Give me 5 minutes to clean up. Victoria assessed James with a quick, dismissive glance. Are you the owner? Yes, ma'am. James Carter. Well, Mr. Carter, thank you for being reasonable. Ethan needs something appropriate for prep school photographs. Nothing too experimental. The way she emphasized the word made her expectations clear, nothing too ethnic, nothing that would mark her son as having visited this neighborhood. As James prepared his station, Victoria paced the shop, making calls and barely acknowledging the other customers. She spoke loudly about property valuations and investment opportunities, oblivious to the growing discomfort her presence created. When James draped the cape around Ethan, the boy finally spoke. Sorry about this. Mom's always busy. No problem, young man, James replied with genuine warmth. Let's make you look good for those photos. As James worked, he engaged Ethan in conversation, discovering a thoughtful teenager beneath the privileged exterior. Victoria occasionally glanced over, checking her watch impatiently. Aren't you done yet? She finally asked. It's just a simple cut. Almost there, ma'am, James responded politely. A good haircut can't be rushed. When he finished, Ethan looked at himself in the mirror and broke into a genuine smile. This is awesome. It looks natural but still neat. Thanks, Mr. Carter. Victoria examined her son critically. It'll do, I suppose. How much? James named his standard price, refusing to charge the premium she offered earlier. Something about the interaction troubled him deeply, not her condescension, which he'd encountered before, but the stark reminder of the divide that developers like her were deepening rather than bridging. As Victoria paid, barely making eye contact, James noticed the Arts Council pin on her blazer. Are you involved with the National Styling Exhibition? He asked casually. She seemed surprised that he knew of it. Yes, I'm a judge this year. Why? No reason, he replied. Just curious. After they left, the shop slowly returned to its natural rhythm, but James remained quiet. The invitation in his drawer suddenly felt heavier with purpose. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom had been transformed into a showcase of styling stations, each numbered rather than named. Banners proclaimed excellence without labels, the theme of this year's National Styling Exhibition. James stood at Station 14, arranging his tools methodically. Unlike the elaborate kits surrounding him, his contained the essential implements he'd used for decades, each maintained with meticulous care. He'd registered under the pseudonym Renaissance, a nod to his belief in honoring traditional techniques. Across the room, Victoria Winslow sat at the judges' table, reviewing the competition guidelines. Her fellow judges included renowned stylists and fashion editors, but as the major sponsor, her opinion carried significant weight. Remember, the head judge addressed them, you're evaluating purely on technique, creativity, and execution. The stylists' identities will remain concealed until after the final judgment. Victoria nodded, though privately she wondered how difficult it would be to distinguish the professionals from the amateurs. Craftsmanship, in her experience, betrayed its origins. The first challenge was announced: New Beginnings. Competitors would create a transformative style for clients seeking a life change. As the competition began, James fell into the familiar rhythm of his craft. His client was a woman recently recovered from cancer treatment, her hair growing back unevenly. While other stylists reached immediately for extensions or elaborate techniques, James took time to talk with her, understanding what transformation meant in her context. Embrace what's new, he told her gently. Let's work with what you have, not hide it. From the judges' table, Victoria observed Station 14 with growing interest. The stylist's approach seemed oddly understated compared to the theatrical performances around him. Others created dramatic before and after moments, this one seemed focused on something subtler. When judging began, the panel moved from station to station. At Station 14, Victoria studied the client's finished look, a short, elegantly shaped style that somehow made the unevenness of new growth appear intentional, even sophisticated. The technique here is peculiar, Victoria commented. Rather old-fashioned methods, wouldn't you say? I expected more innovation in a competition of this caliber. The head judge studied the work more closely. Sometimes traditional techniques achieve what newer methods cannot. Look at how he's worked with the natural growth pattern instead of fighting it. Victoria pursed her lips. It looks like something from a neighborhood shop, not a premier salon. Technically adequate, but hardly exceptional. The client, overhearing, touched her hair defensively. I feel beautiful for the first time since my diagnosis. He understood what I needed. Victoria offered a tight smile but made no further comment. As the judges moved on, she glanced back at Station 14, where the stylist stood calmly waiting for the next challenge, apparently unbothered by her critique. Something about his demeanor irritated her. In her world, ambition announced itself loudly. This quiet confidence felt like a challenge to the very values she lived by. At day's end, when the finalists were announced, Station 14 had advanced despite her reservations. Victoria gathered her notes, determined to be more critical in the next round. Excellence should be immediately recognizable, she believed, it shouldn't require a second look. The second day of competition brought a technical challenge. Stylists would demonstrate mastery of 3 difficult techniques on mannequins, with judges evaluating precision and skill. Victoria approached this round with clinical detachment. Here, Surely, the amateurs would reveal themselves. Proper training left evidence in the details, the consistency of sections, the precision of angles, the cleanliness of lines. As she moved from station to station, she maintained a running commentary for her fellow judges. Note the hesitation in these layers, or see how the graduation lacks refinement. Her expertise was primarily in real estate, but Victoria had strong opinions about everything and delivered them with unwavering confidence. When they reached Station 14, she immediately began her analysis. The old-school approach continues. These techniques haven't evolved since the 1990s. While technically correct, there's nothing innovative here. The head judge tilted her head thoughtfully. I see something different. These are foundational techniques executed with exceptional precision. Notice the seamless transitions. Victoria leaned closer, determined to find flaws. The approach is too simplistic. Any neighborhood barber could achieve this level of competence with enough practice. From behind his station, James listened without reaction. Her words, neighborhood barber, delivered with such dismissive emphasis, sparked murmurs among the other competitors. That's a bit harsh, one of the other judges commented quietly. The execution here shows years of mastery. Victoria waved a hand. I'm simply maintaining standards. We shouldn't award points for basic competence just because it's consistently executed. Excellence requires innovation, not merely tradition. As she continued her critique, James focused on preparing for the next challenge. Her words didn't wound him, he'd encountered prejudice in many forms throughout his career. What troubled him was how such attitudes shaped decisions about communities like Oakwood, where tradition wasn't stagnation but continuity. During the lunch break, Victoria overheard two competitors discussing Station 14. I'd love to know who that is, one said. Those scissor techniques are incredible, I've only seen that level of precision from the old masters. Probably some veteran from one of those downtown salons, the other replied. Though the approach reminds me of my grandfather's barbershop. Victoria interjected, unable to help herself. That's exactly the problem. This competition should showcase forward-thinking style, not outdated techniques that belong in neighborhood shops. The stylists exchanged glances. With respect, Ms. Judge, one said carefully, some of the greatest innovations come from those neighborhood shops you're dismissing. They're cultural institutions that preserve techniques that trendy salons rediscover every few years and claim as new. Feeling challenged, Victoria straightened her spine. I appreciate your perspective, but I've seen genuine innovation, and it rarely comes from establishments resistant to change. As she walked away, she didn't notice James standing nearby, having heard the entire exchange. His eyes followed her thoughtfully as she rejoined the judge's table, her posture rigid with certainty. When the day's results were announced, Station 14 had again advanced, despite Victoria's objections. She studied the mysterious stylist from across the room, irritated by his continued success despite what she perceived as deliberate simplicity. What Victoria couldn't articulate, even to herself, was how the work from Station 14 made her feel something she rarely experienced in her carefully controlled world, uncertainty. It raised questions about her own definitions of value and excellence, questions she preferred to leave unexamined. By the third day, tension permeated the competition space. Only 8 stylists remained, and the challenge intensified, working with difficult clients who had specific, challenging requests. James's client was a man with severe scarring along his scalp from an accident. I'm tired of hiding, the man explained. But I need something that doesn't make the scars the only thing people see. Victoria's attention was repeatedly drawn to Station 14, where the mysterious stylist worked with methodical focus, seemingly undistracted by the cameras and judges circulating the floor. He's not even attempting to cover the scarring, she remarked to her fellow judges. Every other stylist would use techniques to minimize those marks. The head judge observed more carefully. I believe he's creating a style that incorporates them into the overall design rather than attempting to hide them. Victoria shook her head. It's a failure of imagination. When clients have flaws, our job is to minimize them, not highlight them. As the judging round began, Victoria's critique of Station 14 grew more pointed. The approach is unsophisticated. Any barber in any neighborhood shop could deliver this level of work. The client, a middle-aged man with quiet dignity, turned to face her. With respect, ma'am, I've been to dozens of sophisticated stylists who either refuse to work with my scars or try to hide me under products and distractions. This gentleman is the first who made me feel my appearance could be distinguished rather than disguised. The audience, composed of industry professionals and media, murmured their approval, and Victoria felt a flush creep up her neck. She was unaccustomed to having her judgments questioned, particularly in public. I'm simply maintaining objective standards, she replied stiffly. Personal satisfaction is important, but technical excellence must be the primary consideration. From his station, James finally spoke. May I ask what specific technical elements you find lacking? His voice, calm, measured, and oddly familiar, caught Victoria off guard. The conservative approach, she responded. The reluctance to use modern techniques that could better serve the client's needs. And if the client's needs are better served by traditional methods? James asked. Then the client hasn't been properly educated about the possibilities, Victoria replied, her tone growing defensive. An uncomfortable silence followed. Victoria suddenly realized she was engaged in a public debate she hadn't intended to start. Worse, audience sympathy seemed to be with Station 14. The head judge intervened smoothly. Let's continue our evaluations. We're here to judge the work, not debate methodology. As they moved to the next station, Victoria felt uncharacteristically unsettled. She prided herself on certainty, on clear judgment uncomplicated by doubt. Yet something about the stylist at Station 14 had gotten under her skin, perhaps because his quiet confidence suggested there were forms of excellence her metrics couldn't measure. That evening, the announcement came. Despite her objections, Station 14 had not only advanced but received the day's highest scores from the other judges. As competitors and judges dispersed, Victoria found herself lingering, watching the stylist from Station 14 methodically clean his tools, simple implements that contrasted sharply with the high-tech equipment surrounding him. For a brief moment, she felt a flicker of something like recognition. Then she dismissed it, gathering her belongings and heading for the exit. Tomorrow would bring the final challenge, and she was determined to maintain her standards, regardless of the growing sentiment against her perspective. The final day dawned with anticipation thick in the air. Only 3 competitors remained, including the mysterious Renaissance from Station 14, whose consistent excellence had won over audience and judges alike, with the notable exception of Victoria Winslow. The final challenge was announced: heritage and innovation. Competitors would create a signature style that told a personal story while demonstrating technical mastery. James stood at his station, contemplating the challenge. Throughout his career, he'd witnessed how hair could be an expression of identity, resistance, celebration, and belonging. For this final task, he would draw upon everything Oakwood had taught him about the intersection of art and community. Victoria watched him with narrowed eyes. The other judges had overruled her critiques repeatedly, and she'd grown increasingly determined to find objective flaws in his work. Her reputation as a discerning judge was at stake, and, though she wouldn't admit it, so was her certainty about her own values. As the competition began, James worked with deliberate care. His model was a young woman with natural hair who wanted something that honored her grandmother, a civil rights activist who had worn her hair naturally during an era when doing so was a political statement. Victoria observed as James created a style that somehow managed to be both timeless and contemporary, intricate, architectural, yet effortlessly wearable. Despite herself, she found it difficult to look away. When judging commenced, the head judge asked each stylist to explain the story behind their creation. When James's turn came, he spoke quietly but with conviction. This style honors the journey of generations who claimed their heritage as beautiful when society said otherwise. The structure incorporates traditional African braiding techniques passed down through families, while the asymmetrical elements reflect modern perspectives. The room had grown silent, attention fixed on the powerful simplicity of his creation and explanation. And where did you learn these techniques? The head judge asked. In a neighborhood barbershop, James answered, his eyes briefly meeting Victoria's, where cultural traditions aren't trends to be discovered but legacies to be preserved. Victoria felt a chill of recognition but couldn't place why his words resonated so particularly. When the judges conferred, Victoria made her final attempt to diminish Station 14's work. While aesthetically pleasing, the techniques are fundamentally conventional. Nothing we haven't seen before. The head judge regarded her thoughtfully. Perhaps that's because you're looking for novelty rather than mastery. Not everything valuable is new, Victoria. The decisive moment arrived. The three finalists stood on stage, and the head judge stepped forward with the results. Before announcing our winner, this year we're breaking with tradition. Normally, identities are revealed after the winner is declared, but our champion's work has sparked such meaningful conversation about craft and heritage that we believe knowing their identity adds important context to their achievement. Victoria shifted uncomfortably, sensing something significant was about to unfold. The winner of this year's National Styling Exhibition, competing as Renaissance, is James Carter of Carter's Classic Cuts in Oakwood. As applause erupted, Victoria froze, the name and location triggering immediate recognition. The distinguished older gentleman from Station 14 stepped forward, the same man who had cut her son's hair, the barber she had dismissed with such casual condescension. Their eyes met across the stage, and in that moment, Victoria felt the foundations of her carefully constructed worldview begin to tremble. The applause continued as James accepted his award with characteristic grace. Victoria remained rooted to her chair, a peculiar numbness spreading through her as fragments of recent memories reassembled themselves, her imperious behavior in his shop, her dismissive comments about neighborhood barbers, her insistence that true excellence couldn't emerge from traditional spaces. The final judgment sheets sat before her, unmarked. She'd been about to record her last critique when the announcement came. Now, pen suspended above paper, she couldn't bring herself to write the words. As the ceremony concluded, Victoria slipped away, avoiding the customary photographs and reception. In the quiet of an empty conference room, she pressed her palms against her temples, trying to rationalize away her growing discomfort. It doesn't change anything, she whispered to herself. His talent is exceptional, but that doesn't mean the neighborhood itself has inherent value. But even as she formed the thought, its hollowness echoed back at her. If she'd been so catastrophically wrong about James Carter, a master she dismissed based on his location and appearance, what else might she be wrong about? Meanwhile, James found himself surrounded by industry leaders offering partnerships and opportunities. One approached with particular enthusiasm. "Mr. Carter, we'd love to relocate you to our flagship salon downtown. Your talent deserves a more prominent showcase than Oakwood can provide." James smiled politely. "Thank you, but Carter's Classic Cut stays in Oakwood. That community built me. I won't abandon it when recognition finally comes." Later, as the crowd thinned, James noticed Victoria standing alone near the exit, clearly waiting for him. He approached with the same dignified composure he'd maintained throughout their interactions. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Your work today was illuminating." "Thank you, Ms. Winslow." She hesitated, then continued with visible effort. "I believe I owe you an apology for my behavior, both here and in your shop." James studied her, noting the conflict evident in her expression. "May I ask you something, Ms. Winslow? When you look at Oakwood, what do you see?" The question caught her off guard. "I see unrealized potential. Properties that could be more profitable, spaces that could be modernized." "And the people?" Victoria faltered. I haven't really considered the people as separate from the development opportunity." James nodded, unsurprised. "That's the fundamental difference in our perspectives. When I look at Oakwood, I see generations of history, traditions worth preserving, and communities that support each other through difficulties your spreadsheets can't measure." Victoria bristled slightly at his directness. "Progress requires change, Mr. Carter. Sentimentality doesn't create economic opportunity. Neither does erasure, James replied calmly. True progress builds upon what came before, it doesn't replace it. A prolonged silence fell between them. Finally, Victoria spoke again, her voice quieter. You recognized me immediately in your shop, didn't you? Yet you said nothing about the competition. Would it have made a difference if I had? James asked. Victoria considered the question honestly. No, she admitted. I would have seen it as leveraging your participation for preferential treatment. James smiled slightly. Then you understand why I let my work speak for itself. As they parted, Victoria found herself more unsettled than she cared to admit. She'd built her career on certainty, on knowing which properties to acquire, which neighborhoods to transform, which changes to impose. James Carter had introduced doubt not through confrontation but through excellence she'd been trained not to recognize. That night, she revisited the Oakwood development proposal, seeing it now through a lens complicated by her encounter with James. For the first time, she wondered what might be lost in what she had always called progress. The morning after the competition, Victoria sat in her office, the Oakwood proposal spread before her. What had seemed straightforward days ago, acquire, demolish, rebuild, now felt troublingly incomplete. Her assistant appeared in the doorway. The board is waiting for your final approval on Oakwood. Shall I tell them you're ready to proceed? Victoria hesitated. No. Tell them I need to revisit some aspects of the proposal. Is something wrong with the numbers? No, the numbers are perfect, Victoria replied. That's the problem. They measure everything except what might matter most. After her assistant left, Victoria pulled up images of Oakwood on her computer, photographs taken for the development assessment. She'd never really looked at them before, focusing instead on property values and zoning regulations. Now she studied the storefronts, including Carter's classic cuts, seeing for the first time the evidence of community these spaces represented. Across town, James reopened his shop to a hero's welcome. Neighbors had arranged a small celebration, complete with a hand-painted banner congratulating their local champion. You showed them, Mr. Carter. Darius exclaimed. Put Oakwood on the map. James smiled but shook his head. We've always been on the map, son. Some people just read different maps. As the day progressed, a familiar face appeared in the doorway, Ethan Winslow, Victoria's son. Mr. Carter, he said hesitantly. I wanted to say congratulations. I saw the competition results online. James welcomed him warmly. Thank you, Ethan. What brings you to Oakwood today? Actually, The boy hesitated. I wanted another haircut. And to talk to you about something, if that's okay. As James worked, Ethan explained that he'd been researching Oakwood for a school project on urban development. My mom's company is planning to redevelop this neighborhood. Did you know that? I'd heard rumors, James replied carefully. After meeting you, I started wondering what would happen to places like this, Ethan continued. So I interviewed some local business owners for my project. They all mentioned your shop as the heart of the community. James listened thoughtfully as Ethan described his findings, the intergenerational relationships, the informal support systems, the cultural significance of spaces like Carter's classic cuts. I presented it yesterday, Ethan finished. Mom was supposed to attend but couldn't make it because of the competition. I'm showing her tonight. Later that afternoon, Victoria arrived unexpectedly at James's shop. The conversation quieted as she entered, her designer outfit stark against the unpretentious surroundings. Mr. Carter, she began awkwardly. I wonder if we could speak privately. In the small back office, Victoria came directly to the point. I've been reviewing our Oakwood development plans. Your success has complicated my perspective. In what way? James asked. I built my career identifying undervalued properties and maximizing their financial potential, she explained. I never considered that value might exist in forms I wasn't measuring. James waited, allowing her the space to continue her thought. "I'm not here to offer a simple apology," Victoria continued. "Words are easy. But I am re-evaluating our approach to Oakwood. There may be ways to invest in a neighborhood without displacing its culture." James studied her, looking for sincerity beneath the polished exterior. "What changed your mind?" "Partly you," she admitted. "Partly my son, who seems to have developed a genuine connection to this community. And partly—" She hesitated, the realization that my certainty might be my greatest limitation. As Victoria left, she paused at the door. "I can't promise what the final development plan will look like, Mr. Carter. But I can promise it will include Carter's classic cuts, if you want to stay." James watched her go, recognizing that her journey toward understanding had only begun. True change would require more than preserving a single barbershop. It would mean reconsidering the values that had guided her entire career. 6 months later, Carter's Classic Cuts celebrated its renovation with a neighborhood gathering. The shop had been updated but not fundamentally altered, modernized while preserving its character and history. James stood at the entrance, greeting community members and visitors alike. The most surprising guest was Victoria Winslow, who arrived without fanfare, her usual corporate armor replaced by more casual attire. "Your shop looks wonderful, Mr. Carter," she said, genuinely appreciative. "The perfect balance of old and new." "That was the goal," James replied. "Change without erasure." Victoria nodded, understanding the subtle reference to their ongoing conversations about Oakwood's future. In the months since the competition, she'd undergone a transformation of her own, not dramatic or complete, but genuine in its progress. The revised Oakwood development plan sat on display inside the shop, a collaborative vision that incorporated community input and preserved cultural landmarks while still allowing for economic growth. Victoria's company would provide renovation grants to existing businesses rather than replacing them, and new construction would complement the neighborhood's character instead of overriding it. "It's not perfect," Victoria acknowledged, gesturing toward the plans. "Some of my board members still think I've gone soft. But it's a start." James smiled. "Perfection isn't the goal. Respect is." The celebration continued into the evening. James noticed Victoria speaking with various community members, listening more than talking, a significant shift from their first encounter. As the event wound down, Victoria approached James one final time. "I've been meaning to ask," she said, "why did you enter that competition? You clearly didn't need the validation." James considered the question. "I entered because Oakwood needed to be seen, not just as a development opportunity, but as a place where excellence already exists. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to be invisible." Victoria nodded slowly. "I've spent my career looking at neighborhoods like this and seeing only what they could become, never what they already are." "And now?" James asked. "Now I'm learning to look differently," she replied. "It's not easy changing perspectives built over decades, but it's necessary." As the last guests departed, James and Victoria stood on the sidewalk outside the shop. The evening light caught the new sign, still reading, "Carter's Classic Cuts," but now bearing a subtitle, "An Oakwood Legacy." "Your son has quite a future ahead of him," James remarked. "His community development proposals show remarkable insight for someone so young." Victoria smiled with genuine pride. "Yes, he does. He's teaching me as much as I've ever taught him." As they prepared to part ways, Victoria offered a final reflection. "You know, when I first visited your shop, I thought I was the one with all the power, the developer who could decide your fate with a signature. I never considered that true power might lie in creating something so valuable that it demands to be preserved." James nodded. "The most enduring changes rarely come from the top down, Ms. Winslow. They grow from the ground up, rooted in communities that know their own worth." Victoria extended her hand. "I still have much to learn about that kind of change." "We all do," James replied, shaking her hand. "The important thing is to remain open to the lesson." As Victoria walked away, James turned to look at his barber shop, a space transformed without being diminished, much like the neighborhood it served and the people who had found common ground despite their differences. The true measure of progress, he reflected, wasn't in tearing down the old to make way for the new, but in honoring what came before while building something that could endure. It was a lesson written not just in business plans and development proposals, but in the simple dignity of seeing value where others had trained themselves to look past it. In that recognition lay the possibility of genuine transformation, for neighborhoods, for communities, and for individuals willing to question their most fundamental assumptions about what truly matters. Dear friend, the barriers we build between us, of class, race, and assumption, are often invisible to those who construct them yet painfully tangible to those who face them daily. This story reminds us that true excellence exists in unexpected places, and that in dismissing others based on appearance or background, we diminish not just them, but ourselves. The next time you encounter someone society has taught you to overlook, pause. What talent, wisdom, or humanity might you be failing to recognize? If this story touched your heart or challenged your thinking, please like this video to help others discover it. Subscribe to join our community where stories that matter find voice, and where the journey toward understanding ourselves and each other continues with every new tale we share.